It is April 18th, 2025, and after hours and hours of talks between the US and Russia, the Trump administration has reportedly come up with the solution to end the war in Ukraine. They're just going to freeze the conflict because no one has ever proposed that before, and Russia certainly hasn't said time and time again that that sort of a quote unquote solution, which really isn't one when you think about it, would not be acceptable to them. Yet we have another report from Bloomberg claiming that that is exactly what the Trump administration is telling their European allies that they are planning to do when it comes to the war in Ukraine. It feels like madness, but I really think that we have reached the point where there is no excuse at this point. If the Trump administration is still floating a frozen conflict, right? Claiming that, oh, we'll just keep Kiev out of NATO, that is going to help fix everything, then they don't really want a deal. And yet they're pointing the finger at Russia, saying Russia is the one that doesn't really want a deal, as we had Secretary of State Marco Rubio making a few comments to reporters. And apparently the Trump administration is about ready to walk away from peace talks. At least that's how they're making it sound. We are going to be getting into all of the latest here in today's video. But before we do, just a quick reminder that your support makes my work possible. You can always sign up as a monthly paid subscriber. You'll get access to exclusive content. You can also send a one-time donation over on my page on Buy Me a Coffee. I'll leave all of the information in the description below. And we just hit 98,000 subscribers on YouTube. I am so excited. We are so close to 100,000. So thank you so much to each and every one of you who are an active part of that and who are supporting my work. All right, now let's get into the latest madness coming out of Paris, as we just had talks wrap up that included representatives from the US, France, Germany, the UK, and Ukraine. And I want to start off with this soundbite from Marco Rubio because that's what really kicked things off, right? He led the US delegation to these talks. So he's the one, not Donald Trump. Marco Rubio is the one. And we already have had reports this week that Rubio is the one putting pressure on Trump to take a harder stance on Russia. And Rubio has been the one who has been speaking out this month and saying, oh, well, we'll know here pretty quick whether Russia is serious about peace talks. So Rubio is the one who seems to be completely fed up with this process. He's frustrated with talks about talks. And now he's the one talking to US allies in Europe and apparently giving them some sort of a plan, or at least what the US is presenting. So then Rubio talks to reporters, and this is what he has to say.
I think it's important to remind everybody that the Ukraine war is a terrible thing, but it's not our war. We didn't start it. The United States has been helping Ukraine for over the last 3 years, and we want it to end. But it's not our war. I want everyone to understand that. And the reason why I make that point is the president has spent 87 days at the highest level of his government repeatedly taking efforts to bring this war to an end. We are now reaching a point where we need to decide and determine whether this is even possible or not, which is why we're engaging both sides.
It's not our war. Really? Okay. Well, if that's the case, then the US should be able to just stop all of its support for Kiev tomorrow, right? I mean, it's not our war, right? We're just providing some support, except that we're not. The US is actively playing the lead role in propping up Kiev's government and military, providing intelligence sharing. There would not be a war today without the US. Russia has made that very clear. The fact that these talks are happening right now, not between Russia and Ukraine, but between Russia and the US, is a reminder of who the main parties are in this war, right? Who was the leader of this proxy war against Russia? Russia knows that it's the United States. Apparently, Marco Rubio hasn't figured that out yet. But the fact that he's sitting there and saying this isn't our war. Oh, okay. Well, it's just Russia, right? Russia is the one. They are the aggressor. They are the ones who, just created this alliance and kept moving it closer and closer to the US border up until the point where they were right there. And they have this thing called Article 5, which means that, just any different border disputes or land disputes between us and the country next to us, where, let's also add in the fact that Russia was the one that supported a government overthrow in the country next to us. And they installed a government there that hates Americans. Except just flip flop all of that, and then you'll have the current situation that is going on in Ukraine. Because for decades now, you've had Russia in this position where they have been openly voicing their security concerns, right? Openly looking at NATO and saying, hey, your alliance keeps growing. It keeps getting further and further east, even though y'all literally sat there and said that you would not do that. You've gotten your way all the way up to our border. You're wanting to include a country like Ukraine, where you just backed this government coup in 2014, installed a regime that hates Russians. And you're continuing to target the ethnic Russians in eastern Ukraine. This conflict that we're seeing today did not happen overnight. It has been built up over the course of years. And Rubio was doing, and Trump does this too, right? They act as if, it's just Biden's war, right? Biden is the one who let things escalate. He had a weird thing with Ukraine. I don't know. And now Trump is coming in and he's acting like this is not his war, except that it is, except that when Trump sits there and he brags about giving javelins to Ukraine, well, what do you think that they were using those to do? They were using them directly in war against Russia. So this idea that the US has, just no place whatsoever, it's just a fight between Russia and Ukraine. And now we're starting to get annoyed because Russia isn't agreeing to a deal as quickly as we want them to. And why isn't Russia agreeing to a deal as quickly as we want? Because they are the ones winning this war, because they don't need a ceasefire. They don't need a peace deal. Now, are they pursuing direct dialogue with the US to keep us away from World War III? Yes, that's what they're actively doing right now. But this idea that the US is just this third party, right? That they are the one who is coming in and trying to broker peace between these two warring countries on the other side of the world. Well, if that's the case, then the US needs to stop all support for Ukraine tomorrow. If that's the case, then we should see how well Kiev can stand on its own. We should really see how much the US has been doing to prop up Kiev to continue this proxy war against Russia. Because I'm telling you, that will not happen. And the fact that the Trump administration is acting like, they're just a third party, it's like that is not only denying reality, but it is ignoring just how involved in this war the US continues to be to this day. And yes, that's under the Trump administration. I'm also old enough to remember when Rubio was the one admitting that the war in Ukraine was part of the overall proxy war that the US was engaged in against Russia, because he said it just over a month ago.
It's been very clear from the beginning that President Trump views this as a protracted, stalemated conflict, and frankly, it's a proxy war between nuclear powers, the United States helping Ukraine and Russia.
So we have the Trump administration in this position where now we're watching their rhetoric shift, right? Now they're saying, okay, we need to make a deal, let's get done. We know that according to those previous reports that came out between the time that Trump was elected and he was inaugurated, that the timeline was supposed to include a full ceasefire by Easter Sunday, which is obviously coming up this Sunday on the 20th of April. Obviously, we're not going to get a full ceasefire from everything we've seen. If we did, that would be a massive surprise, and I don't think it would last more than 5 minutes. So we have the current predicament. Well, then you get Rubio going to Paris. Now, as a reminder, as we talked about earlier this week, Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, he met with Russian President Putin for a third time. Their conversation lasted nearly 5 hours. And when Witkoff came out of that, he said, okay, we have the framework for a deal, and that deal is going to include the recognition, or Russia is demanding that it include the recognition of these 5 territories, right? Crimea, Donetsk, Lugansk, Kherson, and Zaporozhye. 5 territories that were previously part of Ukraine that have since voted to join Russia. For Crimea, it's already part of Russia, right? It's really these other 4 territories that need to have some sort of a negotiation over, simply because Russia views them as part of the Russian Federation under Russian law, but it doesn't have full control of them right now. So there is no, we just stop this war right where it is, we end things and draw the battle lines where they are, and then we never have future conflict again. That's not really possible at the moment. Now, we don't know what Witkoff and Putin discussed exactly, right? We don't know what the exact framework for a deal looked like, but we do know that it seems like the Trump administration took whatever that was and then they presented it to their European allies as, okay, this is a version of it. And then now we get this Bloomberg report citing anonymous sources. And in it, they say that the US presented allies with proposals to enable a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, including an outline of terms to end the fighting and ease sanctions on Moscow in the event of a lasting ceasefire. They said the proposal would effectively freeze the war, with Ukrainian territories now occupied by Russia remaining under Moscow's control, and that Kiev's aspirations of joining NATO would also be off the table. But it's that term, freeze the conflict, right? And this may just be Bloomberg's interpretation or whoever they were talking to, their read on it, but that's the exact opposite of what Russia has been saying, right? Russia this entire time has said, we will not accept a frozen conflict. So if they do, if they accept a deal, which this would just be a Minsk III style deal, right? We may as well go back to Minsk, take the framework of the previous deal, adjust it a little bit, and then decide we have a new version of it. And we're going right back to talking about no NATO membership for Ukraine, as if that is some sort of progress, right? The West is acting like they're giving Russia something here, right? They're claiming that, oh, but what's not mentioned in this report, I noticed, is the question of, okay, well, what does that mean for NATO support for Kiev? What does that mean for Kiev's neutrality? Because that's been another major factor here. And Russia has mentioned this a number of times, the fact that they're saying, hey, we have moved into a time where Kiev is completely propped up by the West. We're saying that we're not okay with that. We're saying we're not okay with this constant NATO support, with NATO pretty much rebuilding Kiev's military, which would be what would happen if the war stopped today, if there was a full ceasefire. There's no guarantee there that there isn't going to be meddling in the Kiev military that we know it to be today. And on top of that, Zelensky has repeatedly said that there would never be a full recognition of these territories as Russian, right? He came out this week and in an interview, he said, well, yeah, sure, we're going to have a diplomatic resolution. Kiev would agree to a deal, but we would still view those territories as occupied. Well, if that's the case, then there's no point. There is no point in any kind of diplomatic settlement, any kind of Minsk III style deal. We would literally just be freezing the conflict and pausing the conflict. And I get that the Trump administration wants to, wrap this up and put a nice bow on top of it and say, hey, look at us. We negotiated peace in Ukraine. We were able to bring about a quote unquote end to this war. But the thing that Russia keeps bringing up, and I think rightfully so, is the fact that they are not talking about real solutions here. They're talking about, slapping a Band-Aid on it. But for as long as there is still a government in Kiev that is fully supported by NATO, fully backed by NATO, going to be rebuilt by NATO in the event of any kind of ceasefire, then what's the point of having an agreement where you talk about how, Ukraine is not going to become a member of NATO? Well, that's literally in name only, because they are built by NATO, backed by NATO. And so for as long as that is the case, it's hard to see Russia agreeing to some sort of a deal like the one that is being presented in Bloomberg right now. Okay, so we've been over this, right? There's this framework for a deal. Let's say that Russia says no. Let's say that the Trump administration, which it seems like right now with some of the rhetoric that we're getting from Marco Rubio, he's trying to push the fact that, hey, we need to give Russia an ultimatum. We need to say, this is the day you either agree to this or you don't. And that's it. So let's say that Russia doesn't agree to that they give a flat out no, instead of kind of the answer that Putin gave before, where Trump was calling for a ceasefire. And Putin said, hey, yeah, I would love to have a ceasefire. Here's the 87 things we need to work out before we get to that point, before that happens. Let's say that Russia doesn't play the diplomatic game and that they just come out and they say, no, the terms of your deal are not acceptable. We've been telling you that they are not acceptable for literal years now, and you have not adjusted it enough to where we are satisfied. Or they could even point to the fact that, look, Kiev has said that sure, they would agree to a diplomatic deal, but that they would never fully recognize these territories as Russian. Therefore, we can't agree to a deal because it's not being negotiated in good faith. Just like with the Minsk Accords, where you had former German Chancellor Angela Merkel coming out in the aftermath of it and saying, oh, well, yeah, that was really just to buy time so that NATO could rearm and build up Ukraine and its military. Well, Russia is able to, right? They are able to point to Zelensky's latest comments and say, hey, we have the evidence this time around before the fact that this is what Kiev is planning to do, that they are just going to use a frozen conflict to buy time. Well, if that's the case, that the Trump administration gives them some sort of an ultimatum, then what happens after that, right? Instead of easing sanctions, is the Trump administration going to put on more sanctions? Are they going to add more sanctions to Russia, already the most sanctioned nation in the world? Are they going to ramp up sanctions on countries that do business with Russia, that have continued to do business with Russia, even in the face of all of those threats of US sanctions? Is the Trump administration going to then provide more support for Kiev? Because that's the thing. When you look at Rubio's rhetoric and Trump's rhetoric, they talk about, oh, you know, if these peace talks don't go anywhere, we're just going to move on, or we're just going to walk away. It's like, okay, but you're going to walk away from the talks. You're not going to walk away from support for Kiev. And there's going to come a point with, especially the way that things are going right now, where the Trump administration is going to face a crossroads. And that crossroads is going to be over whether or not they approve more aid for Kiev. Right now, Biden did all that he could, right? He approved as much as he could. We're still kind of on that timeline. But the way things are going right now, there's going to come a point where Kiev is going to run out of weapons, and they're still going to be facing massive manpower shortages. So if that's the case, then the Trump administration needs to decide just how involved they want to be in this war. Are they going to walk away from it altogether? Are they going to let Kiev fall and let Russia do whatever they decide to do in the aftermath of that? And it is forever concerning to me that the Trump administration had the opportunity to come in and to say, you know what, this was Joe Biden's war. We're not going to support it. We're removing support. We're pushing for some sort of a peace deal. We're putting our full emphasis behind that. We're not going to continue another day of military aid or intelligence sharing or however else it is that the US is directly involved in this proxy war against Russia. That ends on day one. They had the opportunity to do that. And because they didn't, because they did not do that, and because we continue to watch Trump and Rubio play this game of claiming, well, it's not our war, right? It's not our war. When we all know just how involved the US is directly in continuing this war. We all know that there would not be a war if it were not for the US. That's when I start to get concerned, because that does not tell me that the Trump administration is planning to pull all support for Ukraine, to say, hey, we've done what we could do. That's it. We're going to let Russia do what they want. We tried to negotiate a deal with them. That didn't work out. No. What this is telling me is that if Russia does not give the US, it does not give the Trump administration what they want, that tells me that the Trump administration is going to turn right back around and they're going to try to do exactly what the Biden administration did, which is more sanctions on Russia and more support for Ukraine, more war. Are they going to get us to the brink of World War III? Well, that's a legitimate question on this route that they're on. Because this idea that we're just going to force Russia into peace talks, we're going to force them onto our timeline for ending a war that they are actively winning, that does not sound like it's coming from an honest broker. That does not sound like it's coming from a side that really wants to work with Russia, that really wants to see peace in Ukraine. So for as long as the Trump administration is actively supporting this war, but acting like they're just some third party and they're just waiting for Russia to hurry up and get on it and decide as to whether or not they want a peace deal, well, the message that that should be sending to the entire world is that Trump is not truly done with this war. It's not done with supporting those European allies who are also actively supporting this war. And that should be incredibly troubling to everyone who voted for Trump, thinking that he was truly going to support an end to this war in 24 hours, right? Immediately when he got into office, that he was going to pull support for Ukraine. And that's something everyone should be talking about. If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment. And as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanctioned. You can also check out Sanctioned over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/RachelBlevins. As always, thank you all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.